Hey guys, I have a question. Why in this position as a white, taking your bishop into f4 is considered as a blunder? So please watch the video till to end and learn about this brilliant technique. Hello my dear friends, hope you all be fine and doing well. Thank you so much for joining me again. Thank you so much for joining in your channel with another video. So my dear friends, in this video I'm going to show you one of the best and fantastic traps that you can use while you are playing online or offline. So without wasting the time, let's get started the game. My dear friends, in this position you just simply start the game by pushing the pawn into e4. Now your opponent is responding by pushing the pawn into e5. Just simply develop your pieces by taking your knight into f3 and attack to the weak pawn of your opponent that has no defender. Now your opponent is also simply taking his knight into c6 and he is also defending from his pawn. So you just simply take your knight into c3. Your opponent is also taking his knight into f6. This is one of the chess principles that you should develop your knights before your bishops. So in this position, both players, they are following the chess principles. So if I ask you this question, in this position, what is the best move for white? Maybe majority of you are thinking that the best square for white in this position is to taking the bishop into a4. But believe me my dear friends, this move is blunder. And why? Let me show you. If you take your bishop into c4, in this position your opponent has the brilliant move, and that is capturing the pawn by his knight. So whenever you are capturing back the knight, now your opponent has the best move, and that is pushing the pawn into d5 and attacking to your valuable pieces. So in this position, you are losing one of your pieces. For example, if you capture the pawn, so definitely your opponent is capturing. Black is in a winning position. Why? Because black has the center pawn and he has more advantages in this game. So whenever you are playing with your opponent and you have the white pieces, you should not allow your opponent to bring this much pressure on you. So coming back to the other lines, so my dear friends, now you realize that taking the bishop into f4 is a blunder. So my dear friends, in this position, if taking the bishop into f4 is blunder, so instead of this move, what we can play? So my dear friends, instead of taking your bishop into f4, you can also take your bishop into g5. This is also a good square. But in this position, I'm going to show you another line that you can play against your opponent, and that is sacrificing your knight. So in this position, your opponent is simply capturing your knight. You just simply push the pawn into d4 and attack to your opponent's knight. In this position, your opponent has two options to go. For example, if he decides to take his knight into c6, push the pawn into d5. Now your opponent, if he take his knight into b4, now you have simply pushing the pawn. So in this way, you are taking all the tempo from your opponent. So tempo is nothing but the turn. You want to take the turn from your opponent. My dear friends, in this position, you have this option to capture your opponent's knight. So whenever you are capturing your opponent's knight, so when your opponent is taking, in this position, my dear friends, you should analyze with yourself that you have good control in the center, as you have these two strong pawn in the center. Maybe you sacrifice your knight, but in this position, you are slightly better, and you have this option to play against your opponent. So my dear friends, coming back to this position, when you are pushing the pawn into d5, your opponent has also this option to place his knight into e5. In this position also you are pushing the pawn into f4 and attacking to your opponent's knight. So in this position, your opponent cannot take his knight in these squares, as these squares controlled by your bishop. So what is the best option for your opponent? The best option for your opponent is taking his knight into g6. And now in here you have another best move, and that is pushing the pawn into e5 and bringing more pressure to your opponent. So in this position, your opponent cannot take his knight into g4, as you have control in these squares by your queen. So the best option for your opponent in this position is to taking back his knight into g8. So see, my dear friends, in this position, you sacrificed your knight, but you have full control in the center. And in the next move, you can take your bishop in the center and you can go easily to castle. So you are slightly better, as you sacrifice your knight, but you reached up to this position. If you can manage the game, so it is advisable for you to play and enjoy from your game and bring more pressure to your opponent. Okay, coming back to the main lines. My dear friends, in this position I said that you have this option to sacrifice your knight by capturing the pawn. If you are really interested in this way, you can play against your opponent. And beside this move, you have another best move. And I'm suggesting you, it is better you should go in this line. So my dear friends, in this position I already explained. If you want to have more control and more tempo and bringing too much pressure on your opponent, so you can sacrifice your knight and have more control in the center. But you are such a player that you don't want too much stress and you don't want to be in a critical position, so I am suggesting you another option, and this one is, I think, much more better than sacrificing your bishop, and that one is pushing the pawn into d4. When you are pushing the pawn into d4, majority of the players, they are capturing this pawn, because if your opponent is not capturing, so you have this option to push your pawn into d5. So therefore your opponent is capturing the pawn and attacking to your knight. You have the best move, and that is placing your knight into d5. So my dear friends, in this position, when you placed your knight into d5, your opponent has four main options to play against you. The first one is capturing your pawn. The second one is capturing your knight and replace it for exchange variation. And the third one is taking his bishop or giving a check. So I'm going to explain all the lines, that how you should play and how you should react to your opponent. For example, in this position, if your opponent is deciding to capture your pawn, keep in mind, in this position, you just simply take your queen into e2 and pin your opponent's knight. Now your opponent cannot move his knight and he cannot defend it. For example, if he bring his queen into e7, in that case, you can simply capture the queen. So it is not a good idea. So therefore, what is your opponent doing? And the best move for your opponent is to pushing the pawn into f5 and defending from his knight. So you have another best move, and that is taking your knight into g5 and attacking to your opponent's knight. So your opponents cannot capture your knight by his queen, as you have defending by your bishop. So in this position, if your opponent make a mistake by pushing the pawn into h6, on that time you have this brilliant check by your queen. So in this position, your opponent has only one option, and that is pushing the pawn and covering the check. Now you are capturing the pawn and giving a fantastic checkmate to your opponent, as these squares controlled by your knights and by your queen. So in this way, you can checkmate your opponent if he make a mistake. So coming back to the main lines. So in here, what happens if your opponent take his bishop into e7? In this position, I am suggesting you capture the knight. When your opponent is capturing your knight, you simply capture it by your queen. So in this position, the best option for your opponent is going to castle. Now you have this brilliant move, taking your bishop into d3 and attacking. If your opponent bring his rook into e8, you should not worry about that. You just simply capture the pawn and give a fantastic check to your opponent. Now your opponent is bringing his king into f8. Now you have this fantastic move, and that is placing your bishop into g6. Now he cannot save his rook. In this way, you can dominate the game and you can win the game easily. If your opponent make a mistake, so therefore you have brilliant checkmate by your queen. So in this way, you can trap your opponent. What happens if in this position your opponent push the pawn into g6? In this case, you have to take your bishop into h6 and attack to your opponent's rook. So now your opponent is bringing his rook. So in this position, you have this brilliant move, and that is just simply go to castle. For example, if your opponent bring his bishop into g5, and the reason behind this move is to attacking to your queen. So in this position, you just simply capture the bishop. So your opponent cannot capture your bishop because you are capturing the rook. So what happens in this position? Your opponent first capture your queen. In this position, you have this fantastic move, and you can capture your opponent's queen. In this position, you are also in a winning position. If your opponent decides to save his rook by taking it back, so in this position, you have this brilliant check, and you are attacking to your opponent's rook. In this way, you are also in a winning position, and you have this option to capture the weak pawn. Definitely, you are winning the game. So my dear friends, coming back to the main lines, your opponent is choosing the second option, and that is capturing your knight by his knight. So you have to simply capture it by your pawn. In this position, your opponent is taking his knight back into e7. Now you have this brilliant move, and that is capturing the pawn and targeting the rook. So in this way, your opponent cannot push the pawn because you are attacking to the rook, and also his bishop is blocked. So in this position, you have this option to take your bishop and simply to go castle. You are slightly better, and you can crush your opponent into checkmate. Coming back to the other option that your opponent can play against you, and that is giving a check by his bishop. So when he is giving this check, so you just simply push the pawn into c3. Now he captures, so you are capturing by your pawn. In this position, your opponent cannot capture your pawn because this pawn has a defender, and that is your knight placed in the center. So wherever your opponent take his bishop, so you can play smoothly and you can win the game easily. So wherever your opponent take his bishop, so you can play smoothly, and as a white, you are in a winning position. So thank you so much, my dear friends, for watching this fantastic video. It was a little bit lengthy, and I hope to describe all the lines correctly and perfectly. And I hope you learned something from these moves. So please, if you like my videos, subscribe the channel, share it with your friends and family members. In this way, you are motivating me to make lots of good videos in the future.